Thank you so much, Trix. We are here with Wananchi and we're discussing the impact of the harsh economic times that we're experiencing right now as a country. And before we took the news break, we were speaking to the Bodaboda Association, the East, where? Embakasi East, Asborn, sorry. We were talking to him about the promise made like a week ago about the electric bodabodas. Yeah. Tell me about that. How will that help you as bodaboda riders now to deal with the harsh economic times? Will that reduce your consumption? Of course, now from fuel now to electricity. How will that help you?
Yes, one thing I want to say is that sometimes I fail to understand who is calculating for His Excellency, the President of Kenya. Because I cannot be jumping a small kamtaro and then naenda kuanguka kwa sewage. It's not possible. So what I'm trying to say is that the President promised us, yes. But if I tell you what he talked at the KICC does not add up. Number one, he said, bring your motorbike, we give you the electric one. But he never told us where we are taking that bike. I don't know, we are taking it to Sogoi, or where are we taking it? We don't know. Number two, he said he's going to reduce the electric bill or price. He's going to lower from only the unit where we are charging. So I'm failing to understand. How is that going to work? How can you reduce the price of electricity only in this room, and then the rest of the rooms, the price is still the same? So
but we actually have electric bodabodas right now.
Yes, we have it, but the problem is the electricity also is high. The electricity is high. That's why we are saying if the president wants to help us, he could first work on the fuel. Let the fuel come down. When the fuel comes down, the electrics will come down. And when the electric will come down, we will all enjoy. Yes, electric bike is a good because the world is moving. It's good. Even myself, I do ride one from the Ampersand company. It's good. It's comfort, does not pollute the environment. But the problem is we have approximately 2 million riders in the entire nation of Kenya. So when you say
riding,
bring,
of course, the fuel,
the
fuel
engine. So when you say bring, where is he going to take these 2 million bikes first? Where is he going to take them? So we must have a permanent solution before we do what? And then number two, when you see the affection of the electric of the fuel bike, the fuel is higher. Like the 150 cc, 1 liter could take you about 40 to 70 kilometers. Right now, and we were buying at around 88 shillings. So right now, it is costing 193 shillings. That's close to 200 shillings. Now tell me, in 500, how much do you have? Then number two, President promised us, you bring the bike, yes. Some are among the 2 million people, the riders, 1.6, they're riding loan. They have loan bikes. Now, when you tell me I bring the bike is still on the loan. Is government going to give me the money to offset the loan first from Watu Credit or Mogo or Mkopa? Is he going to give me the money to settle first before I do that?
And I hear you, Asborn.
Yes,
what you're saying is it's like some of those measures are not as practical as you'd expect them to be.
They are not. Completely, absolutely, they are not practical. If we add them up, they are not practical. Electric bike itself is good. As compared to the engine one, it's good. But the problem is, how are we going to do this calculation to enter? Nimekwambia majority ya hawa vijana wako na pikipiki za loan, they have not owned it. Wako na pikipiki za loan. Hizi pikipiki za loan bado wanazilipia. Rais anasema leteni hizo pikipiki. Atatupa kwanza pesa, tulipe huko tumalize mkataba, ndio sasa aturudishie hizi, atupatie zile za electric. And then number two, yeye mwenyewe hajafanya piloting, hajajua ni kampuni gani iko sawa. So we have almost 10 different companies here. Hajatuambia hii kampuni ndio mzuri, hii ndio kampuni. Wenyewe hawajafanya piloting. Na ndio huyu baada anafanya nini? Anatusukuma. So ile kitu mimi ningesema ni ya kwamba wale wanakaa kwa panel ya rais wamuadvise vizuri.
We actually have some experts down there, so
yes,
you
those
can talk
experts
to them
who are here, kindly advise the president in a correct way. Then when I'm speaking on another thing about the value, kindly, as you can see the value of the shilling of Kenya, it has really lose value. Kwa sababu mtu wa boda per day, mtu anaweza pata like 1,000 shillings or 2,000 shillings. Loan analipa 600 or 550. Akona mke, akona familia.
Ngoja, hii ni 550 per day.
Yes. Yes.
Hebu nipigie hesabu tena. Anapata thao.
Anapata thao because economy ni mbaya. Mama sasa wapandi taxi baridi. Wameleta mpaka Uber hii ya miguu tatu hii. They are not taking our
taxi baridi ni bodaboda.
Taxi baridi ni bodaboda. They are not. Yes. Upepo. Hawapandi hata wewe saa hii vile uko hivi huwezi panda
taxi baridi.
Huwezi. Umeelewa? Huyu mtu anapata 1,000. Anapata 1,000 shillings. Alipe loan 550.
Yeah.
Amebaki na ngapi? Na 450
pekee.
Inafaa kwa nyumba watu wakule breakfast, inafaa wakule lunch, inafaa wakule supper. And on top of that, ako na watoto wanasoma, wanaenda kwa shule. And president anaambia huyu mtu atoe tax. Ndio nakwambia hao panel wamekaa hapa, waambie tafadhali, waadvise huyu mzee vizuri. Because mahali imefika, we will decide to mobilize all these 2 million riders. And when we say, mnajua sisi boda, we just give one phone call. Na boda wengi unajua, akona mke na akona mambo ingine huko kama.
Yeah,
so if we combine all of them,
we are hoping we can get a solution to this, and that's why we are having
maybe
this
the panelists
today.
will give us a solution, but to me, I don't see the calculations if they're adding up completely. Kama mtu ana tax marriage, anasema marriage una renew, na bibi akakufa, how will you renew? Hajapeana hiyo.
Let me talk to Tinega. Tinega, you know, MSMEs. Medium and small and medium enterprises, look at them now. Like, you know, the situation is not any better. Tunaambia tuende, like what Wanja had mentioned, young people are being asked to, you know, to start businesses, but there's no purchasing power. Unaanza biashara unafanya nini? Sijui kama situation imekuaje pale Gikomba. How has it been?
Nafikiri katika hii serikali ama regime ya Kenya Kwanza, washauri kuanzia juu, kila mmoja anajipiga kifua. Nafikiri kama ingekuwa ni mashindano ya bodybuilder ama wrestling, wangekuwa wanachukua number 1. Kwa sababu kila mtu anajiona yeye ni mbabe, lazima ifanyike, no one can stop us. Ukisikiza mshauri hapa alivyokuwa anaongea ni kama amezaliwa heaven. And he calls himself ana feel economy ya Kenya maliko. Unajua kule chini mali sisi tuko na mtu anapata less than 300 a day. Mshahara yake ya siku ni shilingi 300. Huyu mtu umempandishia sukari, umempandishia majani, mpaka chumvi ile Mungu amekupatia bure kwa hii Kenya imepanda bei. Wacha kutuambia mafuta imetoka sijui wapi, imepanda sijui per barrel, sijui dollars, sijui nini. Chumvi like magadi hapa. Serikali ya Kenya Kwanza imepandisha bei. You can imagine if these people wametoka another planet, do they belong to God? Do they belong to other side? I don't even know how I can describe them.
You're saying they're not in touch with the reality on the ground?
Completely with the reality of the people. Now, huyu mtu anapata shilingi 300. Hii shilingi 300 ni mshahara yake ya kuanzia asubuhi saa 12 mpaka jioni. Akienda kupanda matatu, fare imepanda. So lazima atembee. Akitembea anakutana na mkora barabarani. Ile kidogo amesevia watoto imefanya nini? Imeenda. Number 2, hile mtumba anafaa kuwa ananunua kuvalisha watoto wake imepanda bei. So in the next few days tutakuja kujikuta we are having a country yenye watu wanatembea uchi like the ancient days. So mimi nikiwa kwa mtumba naangalia hii ushuru imepandishwa kwa kila kitu ya mtumba. Ukiwa unauza viatu imepanda, ukiwa unauza nguo ya kawaida imepanda. Look at the quality and packaging ya hii mtumba. Wana import na kwa hii nchi yetu wanatuletea ni kama bora tuishi. Na ushuru ndio hiyo. Ukiangalia huyu mtu ambaye ana operate ka small kiosk hapa ya chai. akienda kwa duka vitu hazinunuliki. So serikali inakwambia chukua loan ya shilingi 500 kwa hustler fund, uweze kujikimu kimaisha, uanzishe biashara. Hii shilingi 500 tayari washa kukata shilingi 25. Wanakuambia una save. Hii kusave, unasevia nani? Hujafanya biashara, una save. So, kabla sijasahau. Kuna hii biashara inaitwa pale sokoni tuko na hawa watu ambao kwamba tunakutana, tunatoa pesa kidogo kidogo, sawa? Tunasema huyu wacha tumuinue. Kwa sababu biashara ilikuwa imeanguka, wacha tumuinue. Ukija kumuinua ile pesa ambayo kwamba mnaita nyinyi kwa lugha zenu mnasema merry go round. Sisi tunaita, sisi kwetu kwa soko tuna boost. Hiyo pesa lazima ipigwe nini? Ushuru. Sasa hii serikali hii pesa inaokota pesa ya kutusaidia sisi kama wa Kenya, au inaokota pesa ya kuwalipa hao washauri wenye tunawaona upande wa pili wa studio, kuwalipa mishahara mikubwa? Naona juzi wameongeza mishahara kwa hawa jamaa, imagine eti wanaongeza kwa mabwenyenye. Huyu mwalimu anayefanya kazi ya chekechea hapa chini amefinyika.
Ilikuwa proposal ilikuwa imefanywa na SRC.
No. Yeah. Unajua Kenya kila kitu inakujaga hivyo. Hata hii bill sasa hii tunaita act ilianza kama nini? Proposal. So we are just dealing with it the way it is. Back to sender.
Yeah, okay. Ken, you heard him right. Tinega there speaking on behalf of the micro, medium and small enterprises. And of course, the chairman up of bodaboda talking about the electric bodabodas that the president talked about last week. To the experts now, what solutions do we have to this? Because he's talking about 300 shillings a day. Traders who are getting 300 shillings a day and they have to feed their families, they have to take their children to school. How do we sort that out? To you, Ken.
Becky, very interesting question indeed, and we have the right answers here, because we've been listening to the common wananchi, let me call them, and the biggest issue that comes out is the people who don't own pay slips. How do they budget? And I know Centonomy is big in budgeting and talking about how to spend finances. I'll be talking to Waithaka, but I think that's a direct question to you, Mheshimiwa, especially because it came from the president's function.
Asante, ningetaka kujibu kwa lugha ya Kiswahili ndio niweze kumwambia ule mwenzangu ambaye amesema ni mwendeshaji wa bodaboda. Mara mingi wakati when we want to make a difference, wakati tunataka kuleta tofauti katika mambo fulani, mara mingi kwa kwanza haieleweki. Na niliona watu wakisema basi hizi boda ambazo tunasema zitakuweko, ambazo tayari ziko, na kukinyesha itakuwa namna gani? Nimesikia watu wakiuliza hivyo. Wanauliza basi charging yake itakuwa inafanyika wapi? Ken, utafiti ambao umeweza kufanyika ni kwamba huyo mwana bodaboda anatumia shilingi 4 na senti 90, 5 shillings per kilometer anapobeba mteja. Akianza kubadilisha hiyo bike yake atoke kwa ikue ya mafuta iende kwa electric, ile cost ya kucharge hiyo ambayo ataicharge usiku ama wakati atacharge, ataweza kulipa cost yake ya shilingi 2 na senti 50. Kwa hivyo hizo hela ambazo unaogopa ya kwamba hutakuwa nazo za kujikimu katika maisha, tunakupunguzia gharama ya kuoperate hiyo bodaboda yako kwa 50%. Juu ya hayo, hizi bodaboda ambazo tuko nazo ambazo zinatumia mafuta, lazima utafanya ile oil change kila baada ya kilomita kadhaa. Ukikuwa na basi bodaboda yako ikue isiyotumia mafuta, hautakuwa na hayo expenses ama hayo expenses ya kuweza kufanya oil change. Of course, tuliona miaka kadhaa iliyopita wakati kulianza kuja zile hybrid cars ambazo inatumia inajicharge na inaweza kutumia mafuta. Wakenya wengi walikuwa na tashwishi yake. Wanasema hapana, pengine itazimia, pengine itatachajiwa wapi. Lakini unaona utafiti umeonyesha kwamba katika custom zetu yale magari mengi ambayo sasa Wakenya wanayatumia ni magari ambayo ni hybrid. So tukisema hivi na mimi Ken, nimechukulia kwa sababu I am personal about this. Juma mosi ya wiki jana, 15th of July, nitawaita wanabodaboda wote. Mimi nitaanzia pale Molo constituency, na waleta wale ambao wanauza hizi bikes ambazo ni electric, tukuje kuziona.
Okay.
Juzi nikienda Westlands, niliona baiskeli ambayo ilikuja kanipita kwa kasi sana. Nikashangaa, huyu mtu anaweza kunipita kwa kasi hivyo namna gani na ako na baiskeli akiwa amebeba na watu wa deliveries. Kumbe ndio nikaona kwamba ni hizo electric bikes, kwa sababu haitumii nguvu yoyote na it's actually very fast. Na umeona kwamba hizi makampuni zote ambazo wanafanya deliveries za chakula hapa Nairobi, na huyu mwana bodaboda akiwepo, amesema wameacha kutumia bodaboda ambazo zinatumia mafuta, wameenda kwa bodaboda ambazo zinatumia stima.
Okay.
Tumeweza kutoa taxes zote. Kulikuwa na excise duty ambayo ilikuwa katika ile bodaboda. Tumeweza kuzirorate zile vitu ambazo zinatumika kutengeneza hizo bodaboda, ili tuweze kupunguza the cost ya hizo bodaboda. So once we do that, Ken, that bodaboda rider does not need to be worried about his disposable income. He is going to have more money to feed his family than he's having now.
Saving 2 shillings. I think we need to give Vincent
50%.
50%. 2 shillings
50% saving, yes.
Vincent, are you satisfied with the response?
No, I am not satisfied, and I wanted to ask him a question. You are talking, the problem is, hawa watu ambao wa mishahara mikubwa, sometimes you don't understand what the common mwananchi is going through. Na before mfanya kitu, it is good you involve the stakeholders. At least you have the opinion. Sahi, one unit kucharge your battery jae, it needs around 5 to 4 units, which is around 120 shillings. You have not added any other thing. Ukiongeza hizo vitu zingine, plus the house rent and whatever, it will accumulate to almost 150 or 200 shillings, one charge. And the charge will take you for about 70 to 80 kilometers. And if you have a bike that can go beyond 30 kilometers, my dear friend, kindly bring it. I have tested all the electric bikes that are here. I have tested Rom, I have tested Akira, I have tested Ampersand, can I continue mentioning? Or let me stop it there because of time. So I have tested them. There is no bike that is going beyond 80 kilometers per swap. And you are paying 150 to 180 shillings. So my question is, if you are saying I'm going to charge with 3 shillings or 4 shillings, wewe ndugu yangu kweli, na suti yako tu mzuri, huoni kama unanichezea mahali hata wewe? Number 2, yenye nataka kusema ni hii. Umesema ya kwamba mambo na spare part nini? Hizi vitu hazina spare part hapa Kenya. Niambie duka yenye nauza saa hii spare part za electric bike. Vile umekaa tu hapo. Tell me one. Hakuna. Number 2, mota ya hiyo pikipiki, mota ya bike inauzwa 120 shillings. Na lazima upeane order iimportiwe kutoka sijui China ama sijui na. Wewe unajua maana nyinyi labda mko na portion ndani. You know where you do import. Hiyo kitu kiimport is about 120 shillings. Normal engine ya 150cc, it is going to 40 to 35,000 to 40,000. Now, wewe ukicompare, unaona ni wapi unaweza enda ndugu yangu? So, if you respond to me, please respond precisely, because I'm still here.
Unajua, unfortunately ndugu yangu, unadeal na mtu mwenyewe ako na bike hiyo ya electric. Na wakati tulianzisha hii conversation ya issue ya electric bikes, I actually went myself kutafuta zile kampuni ambazo zinatengeneza. Na yangu ni ile ya eBay. Na that bike, I went over the weekend kule Molo, nikaenda kutoka kwa nyumbani hadi kwa shamba yangu kuangalia mazao ya shamba, na nikarudi nayo nyumbani. Na nikaweza kuascertain ya kwamba vile unasema ni ukweli, ya kwamba hiyo bike inaenda, moto yake inatumika only 80 kilometers. Tukatoka na my farm manager anaitwa Kiari. Yeye akachukua boda ile nduvi ambayo yeye anachukua kuweka shamba, akaenda akaweka mafuta, tukaenda shambani na tukarudi. And for sure, ile cost ambayo hiyo bike ya mafuta ilitumia kwenda shamba pale Landi, kutoka kwangu Molo kwenda shamba pale Landi na kurudi, ile cost yake ilikuwa 50% more expensive kuliko hii ambao tulicount zile units, na tuliweza kuzima vitu zote katika ambazo zinatumia stima na kuweka tu i-charge na kuangalia kwa mita ile units ambazo zilikuwa zinatumika. Kwa hivyo I know change sio rahisi. Hautaki hiyo boda ya stima. Unataka vile umezoea, unaenda pale kwa petrol station, unaweka mafuta yako ya shilingi 20, unaenda sukudi moja unakuja unaweka. For sure na kuelewa. Lakini ya kwamba tumefika mahali katika ulimwengu, sisi hatuna mafuta yetu hapa. Kwa hivyo hatuwezi kugarantia kwamba tutaweza kupunguza bei ya mafuta because we do not manufacture. Hatuna oil hapa nchi yetu ya Kenya. Tulijaribu kufanya subsidy ile serikali ambayo ilipita wa kureduce bei ya mafuta, tuliona haiwezekani. Serikali ambayo ilipita hata wakati walisema wamesubsidize mafuta, hawakuweka pesa kwa budget. Kuja kuwekwa kwa budget shilingi bilioni 20 katika budget ya mwaka huu. So I understand you. Change is not easy. And I know, I can feel you do not want to change. But I'm sorry my brother. Unless you want to get away from hiyo cost, unasema unashinda na nduvi yako the whole day na ikuwekei shida na ikuwekei chakula kwa meza. Ukitaka kutoka kwa huo ukombo from that slavery, you have to change the way you do business. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you don't expect a different result.
What is the catch? What is the real interest?
To ask you something, my brother.
What is the real interest of Vincent? I'm coming back to you. What is the real interest of the government in this? Is it really taking care of the border operators, or is a peculiar interest? Because there's a lot of questions that have been asked about the importation, who gets the quota, who gets to import all these things. There's a business aspect to this. So what is the real interest of the government in this thing?
I will tell you, the government of Kenya has 3 interests. There is definitely the interest of creating jobs from those particular sectors. For example, the manufacturers of those electric bikes. It is true that there are going to be jobs that are going to be created. If we start consuming bodabodas that are built here in Kenya, we cannot continue. Hata nduthi tunatoa Japan, tunatoa China. We are consuming everything from other countries. And then we continue to complain that our exchange rate of dollars against the shilling yetu ime depreciate kwa sababu ya exchange rate, because we are over relying on this on this import. That's one. Number 2, the cost of fuel is a constant cost. And do we have control about it? No.
Okay.
As in, I can authoritatively say that no government can claim that they can control the price of fuel unless they have oil deposits in their country. South Africa tried it. They failed terribly. So because we do not have our own fuel, we must start training ourselves to consume products and services that do not require that fuel. For example, electric bodabodas.
Number 3. You said 3 interests.
And of course, number 3, the third interest. When these bodabodas, because of their consumption of fuel, their tear and wear is actually more than that of electric bikes. And therefore, you find, if you go to most police stations in the country, you'll find behind the police station, there is a yard of motorcycles that was impounded, and then the owner realized the value of it, and because of the high rate of depreciation of those bodabodas, that it was not being of any value to them, even if they took it back. And every police station in this country now has like a dump site behind them that has all these bodabodas. They become again an environmental hazard in our country. So you're saying we need to change. Let us use a new motorcycle that has parts here, and it is not true that those parts are not available. I can take you, nitakupeleka kwa kampuni kesho ambao utaona kuna parts ambazo zinatengenezwa.
You've said something very interesting. I need to go to the gentleman here because there are a lot of other questions that needs to be asked and answered, especially to Centonomy. But when you say no government controls the fuel prices, what was being tried by the Deputy President, the government-to-government orders and quotas, stabilizing the dollar and all those things by the end of the year? What was that about if the government knew that they cannot control this?
It is an attempt, Ken, and it's an attempt in the right direction, because we are attempting to reduce the cost of fuel. And that attempt of having that government-to-government contract between Kenya and UAE actually mitigated an increase in fuel that would have been worse than it is now. But again, Ken, honestly, where are we getting this oil from? From UAE.
Okay.
So the price of it is what the UAE, the one who are owners of oil, are going to sell it to us.
Okay.
So what if we have control of the cost of our production, of the cost of our raw materials? It is like saying, I have niko na shamba na niko na viazi naweza kwetu Molo tunalima waru. Niko na waru naweza toa kwa shamba nipikie watoto. That I have control over. But if I start thinking about consuming something else that I do not have in my shamba, like whether I want to have pasta ama wakati nataka kula nyama, lazima niende kwa duka. So hiyo bei ambayo utanunua pale kwa duka itakuwa subject to demand and supply.
Okay. Now I go to Wanja because Wanja had a very interesting perspective, and Becky, perhaps it's a time for her because she brought in a very interesting perspective after we had Waithaka talk about payslip holders. Her interest is those people who doesn't have or possess the payslip. Perhaps it's her time now to ask our expert a question.
If I could just speak with the experts and the people in the room, I'll start by first saying that there's a very good reason why our constitution enshrined and is very big on public participation. So if the issue of the bodaboda people was about, if the people of the boda people was about electric bodabodas versus which other bodabodas, I wonder how many bodaboda people were. I wonder how many bodaboda people were consulted. I wonder how many people say that they don't want fuel vis-a-vis the steamer ones. That said, electricity is very expensive in this country. Very, very, very expensive. But that said, I still go back to the basics. I know you've seen campaigns of wananchi wearing sufurias, campaigns of wananchi saying that the cost of food is very expensive. And I might add, it's not only ugali, unga of ugali that is expensive, it's other food and other consumables. So I wish to ask, if indeed the government cares about her own people, with all these mathematics of millions and billions, how come we also have wananchi who cannot feed themselves? One of the things that people are submitting and people are saying, why can't you subsidize food? That is the basics. We are working with the basics. For as long as you'll have people walking with sufurias in their head, people walking with the sufurias saying that we have not eaten ugali, I wonder why we go so abstract about electric bodabodas, giving examples of South Africa. I might add that South Africa has the best social protections in the continent. So I'm sure there are people who are not struggling with basics like food. So some other issues really is just about subsidy. But now that we are talking about budget and the Finance Act, now that we are talking about an act that was extremely unpopular with wananchi, that was forced, whereby even members of parliament, you could see them trembling when their name is being mentioned. We are talking about a Finance Act whereby the members of parliament were saying that if it was a secret ballot, they could not have passed it. That budget has a deficit of 720 billion. That is what is in the public domain. Certainly, the minister talked about very many issues that he described as a perfect storm. But my question is, Mheshimiwa, panels of experts, even as you answer me about subsidies, because people want basic first, there is one deficit of that very budget that you have conveniently forgotten to address. It is called the trust deficit. Even as that budget has 720 billion money deficit, we don't have we have a huge $1 trillion trust deficit with how that budget is going to be managed. How do you expect really to trust such people whereby the top economic advisor to the president goes on Twitter every other minute to talk about wastage? So we are seeing a lot of inequality perpetrated by Kenya Kwanza. We are seeing a lot of taxing us dry, but on the other side we are seeing wastage, one-ton personal privileges and perks. Why then, if you have a lot of money to waste, why can't you relax some of these taxes to ensure that your people are having a good life?
Before the Mheshimiwa answers our learned lady friend here, thank you very much for that. May I say to I'm speaking on behalf of Wanjiku. Bwana Kuria. The president was in the constituency yesterday, and he was received quite coldly. And people were not responsive. People were just looking at him. He tried to warm them up by giving them the usual promises. You are the chair to the finance committee. My question is, why the legislature, why are you not listening to Kenyans? Researches have been done. 91% of Kenyans wished that the finance bill would not pass, yeah? But you MPs still passed it, yeah? And we are going to write songs. We are going to do comedy skits. We are going to make sure that the names of the MPs who voted yes, because right now Kenyans are really suffering, yeah? And it's because of the Kenyan parliament. To some extent, I will not even blame the president of this nation, because he had to ask. You did not have to say yes. You are elected by the people in your constituency so that you can represent the grievances. But you have not. You have represented the government. You are lying on the side of the government. You are fighting for the government at the cost or at the need of the people who voted you. You have forgotten the people. You have left the people on their own. And they are shouting at the top of their voices. You saw what happened in your constituency. Jana too, the people did not give the president the kind of reception they gave him during campaigns. That should say a lot to you guys. And now you have a chance. Because of Okiam Mtata, the court has temporarily halted this finance bill. It is your only chance. It is your only chance, yeah, to get it right. Yeah?
Eric, we get your point. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. We'll be coming back to Eric. You have a right of response. I thought the question was going this way, but because you have a right of response, yes.
Eric, I didn't see you in Molo yesterday. We had a very vibrant church service at St. Mary's Catholic Church Molo. I didn't see you. And perhaps next time you should actually be there, so that once you say some of these things, you speak from an information of no. And secondly, Eric, I saw you demonstrating outside Parliament, crying that there is an introduction of 15% digital content monetization tax. And you said it is unfair because all the other professionals like lawyers and managers and accountants pay a withholding tax of only 5%. And this conversation was by digital content creators, including yourself. Now, this law that you are very happy is being repealed actually reduced that digital content creation tax from 15% to 5%. Wanja talks about subsidy. You people don't want to pay, you do not want us raising revenues. The cost of subsidizing maize flour alone would have cost around 40 billion shillings.
The whole financial year?
Not even the whole financial year. I'm comparing that to the money that we spent on fuel for like 3 months, the 3 months that we had that subsidy. If you want to subsidize maize flour, so do you give that money to the miller in Mombasa? Do you do it to the transporter? Do you give it to the wholesaler? Do you give it to the supermarket? Do you give that money to the retailer? And that is why, despite that attempt by last regime to subsidize maize flour, it did not work.
So we
have now this time, even, the money left Treasury, they went to the millers, and millers came and told us, we never received that money. So subsidy is completely out of question. But you're going to find a difference. You're going to see a reduction in the cost of maize flour once you have now the maize that is now on people's farms harvest. Because I am a farmer. If I plant my maize with fertilizer of 6,500 like I did in the last harvest, you cannot buy that maize from me at a lower cost. I will not sell it. I will hold it. And that is a fact. Ask any farmer.
Okay.
But now, because we have the maize now I have in my farm, I planted it with fertilizer of 3,500. I am willing to pay to get a less cost on my harvest. Lastly, Ken, why are we having a conversation about finance? Well, this Finance Act is only raising around 211 trillion shillings. But we have a 3.7 trillion budget that has been appropriated. I would love this passion that we are condemning the Finance Act to be done exactly the same on the Appropriation Act. But you know why they won't touch it? Because the appropriation, on the other hand, that appropriates the 23 billion shillings, for example, that are being raised by the housing levy. We have 42 out of the 47 governors that have already signed MOUs with the State Department of Housing. And when I mean 42 governors, is across the political divide, saying we want these houses in our counties. That is a fact.
Okay.
We have already for all the 47 counties, we have these aggregation centers that are going to be there for our farmers. We have a double allocation for money for higher education loans board. We have money to recruit 20,000 new teachers. We have money to recruit an additional 25,000 interns with the ministry. 8,000 new teachers are going to be employed in our TVETs. We don't want to discuss that.
Okay.
And that, Ken, was signed into an act
And
the same time
nobody's talking about it.
when the Finance Act was passed. So we want to have a conversation about the roads that wants to be done, the aggregation centers that are going to be built,
But we don't
the
want to talk about
employers
how
that
to
are
get
going
the money.
to be employed.
Okay.
But when it comes to where the money is going to come
No one
from,
cares about that conversation.
everyone demonizes
I
it.
need to pass this conversation right now to the other people because we need to talk to the employers and the employees. But I can't go to them before I give you a right of response. When you address the issue of payslip, what happens to the people who don't have payslip? When you talk an issue of planning and budgeting, it's done by experts. What happens to people who didn't go to school? It feels a little insensitive from one just point of view.
Well, Ken, you're right. And I don't want to be insensitive because there are people in our nation today who are struggling to have a meal. And in that case, I'm not speaking to that person because that person is making choices about survival today. But there is a large part of this population, in fact, that's the discussion we were having during the break here, is that we were wondering, look, we are over 50 million Kenyans in this place. And what we were discussing here is only 2.9 million who are actually in this tax bracket that we're discussing here. There's a huge population who are doing business, who are doing work, and who are not actually involved in the discussions that we're having here. For those who are involved, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we were training street vendors, and they're dealing in sweets, sodas, and different things that are on the street. And we went and we spoke to those people, and we began to just to probe a little bit more and find out, okay, so when you come to work, what are your expenses like? And they were being honest. In the morning you arrive, you come very early, yes, because you have to do it, and you buy a cup of tea. Then after a while, somebody will come by with some fruit, and you buy some of that fruit. And then at lunch hour, you want hot lunch. In fact, that was the word that they used. We want hot lunch. So they buy some lunch, and then in the afternoon, because now there's somebody bringing some uji, you buy some uji. When we added it up, we found that these street vendors who were complaining about the level of income, they were spending over 250 shillings on food for themselves.
Per day.
For themselves, not for the family, for one person. And so when we placed it before them and asked them, why don't you cook some extra food, because you're going to cook when you get home, and put it in a lunchbox and carry it to where you're going to do your work. And they said, but it's not hot during that day. So we challenged them again about their mobile phones. And many of them, I'll give the example, our house help, and she has allowed me to give this information. When we did an assessment of her mobile phone usage, we found that every time we call her, there's a new song greeting us on her phone. And we're wondering, look, we try as much as we can to pay above minimum wage, but she's spending over 10 shillings per day for songs that entertain me, not even her.
Yeah.
On her phone, 10 shillings per day for somebody who's earning at that level. There's a level that we have to begin to take responsibility for ourselves.
Okay.
But, Ken, I'm being very careful here, because in this nation, there's somebody who doesn't even have that 10 shillings for food. And that's where the community matters. That's where, if you can be able to support somebody next to you, support them.
Okay.
Give them the help that they can be able to get. But for those who are earning, we have to take responsibility for ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well said. You have to weigh in. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been said, from the budgeting, from the government, from the promises that were made, from realistic pledges, and from where he wants to move the country to, now talking about the government. And you feel they have a real passion for what they want to do, but it doesn't translate to this taxpayer. Why is it that this thing does not stick?
So there is an increasing abyss between the political class and the citizenry. And I think it goes back to the participation question. It's been said that taxation without representation is tyranny. And I think people felt at some point that probably parliamentarians do not represent them very well, and they went and embedded in the constitution the need for citizen participation. But I think the question can be asked, is the citizen participation really happening? And I think Mheshimiwa didn't address that. It would be nice to probably in a later session for him to address that a bit. And I think the question about the citizen participation that is happening, is it really translating to the policies that we see? And I say that because I think the question was asked on the electric bikes as well. The question has been asked about conversion of the housing levy to a housing tax. That was a completely new proposal that needed to go back to the citizens, as opposed to the Finance and Budget Committee making a decision and then it going to Parliament without participation. Now, today, the courts have overruled the CAS decisions, partly because participation for about 23 of them, for citizens, did not happen. And I think there's a pseudo participation that is happening in this country, that people start feeling like, actually, maybe the government is not listening from the citizens as much as it should. And even if it's listening, they're very, very eclectic. So they will ignore the majority of the feedback and just be very, very selective of the few feedback that fits whatever it is they want to do, and then convert that into policy. So I think we have to come back to the citizen participation, because I think for me that's very, very critical as well. Now, the issue of representation, I think as well, is subject to question actually. People are wondering, given the unpopularity of some of the clauses, and I think sometimes we demonize the whole Finance Act, and I think as Mheshimiwa has said many times, there's a lot of very, very good things into that. But even if this bottle of water had 99% water and 1% poison, probably you want to rethink and say, maybe I need to look at that 0.00% before I drink the water. So the act has a lot of goodies that would be easily passed. But I think the concern has been, what about those clauses that Kenyans pronounce themselves very, very strongly against, that again, they were fully ignored, both by the committee that took feedback from citizens, but equally by parliamentarians who decided to side with the executive and pass the bill without really listening to what the citizens are saying. So I think for me that's a going concern, that there's an increasing gap between the electorate, between the citizens, between the population, versus what the executive really want to push through.
So there's a lot, and I know we're coming back to talk about this, and there's still a lot of fire coming on the government side, now represented here by Mheshimiwa from Molo. But I want to go to Noah, because Noah is sitting with employers. Now I'm going to read for you part of the consequence of getting the corporate tax as proposed. But before that, Mheshimiwa, there's a text that comes in, and Winnie says, Kenyans came before your committee in large numbers and told you why the finance bill was a bad idea and unwanted. But the committee ignored, not you, the committee ignored all those pleas. What a waste of the participation. I'm coming to you to answer this. But no, this is very important, because some of the consequences that the employers you're sitting with are likely to face, it's a dilemma, because it's a dilemma of finances, because they are going to face financial challenges. Mheshimiwa tells us there will not be any financial challenge because there's a credit against a debit somewhere. He explained it. Downsizing, likely to face them, and of course the salary cards. From what you told us earlier, is like they seem to be chasing their tail. But I know you've been joined by additional people in the panel. Tell us exactly how this is going to affect the employees before we talk to Ali Manzo, who's having the employees with them. I mean, the employees actually with them. Talk to us.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. And the discussion, in fact, while we were listening to the back and forth between the two parties, the representatives of Wananchi and also the legislature representation, His Excellency Kimani Kuria, we are asking ourselves here, what exactly is going on? And one of us, Stephen, noted that Kenya is still undergoing the stages of grief, because we are pointing out the issues, the painful moments that we know we'll have to undergo. But question is, now how do we handle, we're already in this boat, okay? To use that references, my name is Noah, we're already in this boat. It's taken sail. how do we mitigate this particular issue? And joining me also in this particular panel, we have Kevin Osido, who is the Executive Director, County Governance Watch. And Kevin, briefly, I'll give you a moment to also undergo the stage of grief, especially as part of the NGO community.
Yeah.
Are you guys touched? What changes do you expect in this financial year in the NGO world?
Thank you so much, Noen, for this opportunity. Of course, NGOs, once registered with the legal requirements of the Republic of Kenya, and you employ people, you contract them, you are expected to comply. And so most of these taxes actually also affect us as non-governmental organizations. The really difficult bit of it is how to cope and how to mitigate. And the beauty, of course, is that even as because most NGOs are non-profits, we don't have opportunities to make profit. We rely on our brains. Be creative, be innovative, and then you do a proposal and you hope that somebody somewhere will probably like your idea and wish to support it. So that also presents another dilemma, because even as we seek to deal with the internal issues, which are the requirements of a number of the provisions in the Finance Act, is also how do you now communicate that to the outside world? So the Friends of Kenya, the donor community, and partners that we engage with. So part of the things that we are doing is one, capacity building, or just helping our colleagues, employees to understand a number of the requirements of the Finance Act, which is really more or less like the grieving cycle we were talking about. People have a lot of issues, and now the most difficult and saddening thing is that we are more or less conjoined, like the Siamese twins, where, for instance, if you reduce payroll or salaries of an employee, the mamamboga down at the gate of this particular individual expects that when you are coming into your house, you're going to probably buy something. The gentleman at the supermarket is hoping that you will go and buy something out of him or her. The bodaboda players are also hoping that you will use them as a means of transport. So the triple effect is so huge, that it becomes very difficult to just look at employers and employees on their own, because we more or less depend on each other. And probably my friend here also is hoping that when you go on your way to work early in the morning, you will walk into his restaurant and you want to give him some chums. Failure to which, if you don't have it, definitely is also going to lose it. So I think the risk mitigative opportunities that we now have to discuss the consequences, I think, is the opportunity that is presenting itself.
Definitely, and we're going to do that in detail, but at this particular moment, we want to take a short break right here at The Impact, and this is dissecting the Finance Act 2023 and how it impacts you. But for now, we take the break.